Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a boy named Jack. Jack was known throughout the village as a clever and quick-witted boy, but he was also stubborn and mischievous. He had a knack for getting into trouble, often sneaking around and stealing small items from the villagers. One day, while wandering through the village, Jack overheard a group of travelers talking about the royal family who lived in a grand palace nearby. They spoke of the king's treasures, the golden statues, the sparkling jewels, and the beautiful crowns. Jack began to plan his daring heist. He spent days watching the palace from a distance, carefully observing the routines of the guards. Late one night, when the moon was high and the village was asleep, Jack set out for the palace. He moved silently through the forest, avoiding the moonlit paths and staying in the shadows. As he approached the palace, his heart pounded with excitement and fear. Jack climbed through the small window and found himself in a dimly lit hallway. He moved cautiously, avoiding the guards and staying in the shadows. The palace was grand and filled with treasures, just as the travelers had said. When Jack reached the treasury, he used a small tool to unlock the door and slipped inside. The room was filled with treasures beyond his wildest dreams. Jack quickly filled his bag with as much treasure as he could carry. Just as Jack was about to leave, he heard footsteps approaching. The guards entered the room, their footsteps echoing in the silent treasury. Jack carefully retraced his steps, climbing back out the small window and running all the way back to the village. The next morning, the palace was in chaos. The king was furious when he discovered the theft. Jack was clever. He hid the stolen treasures in a secret place in the forest and acted like nothing had happened. The royal guards scoured the village and the surrounding areas, but they couldn't find any clues. Jack's name was never mentioned, and he continued to live in the village, known only as a mischievous boy. One evening, Jack gathered the stolen treasures from their hiding place in the forest. He walked to the edge of the village and called for a meeting. The villagers gathered, curious about what Jack had to say. Jack confessed to the villagers, admitting he was the one who stole from the royal family. The villagers were shocked by Jack's confession, but they could see the sincerity in his eyes. Jack and a group of villagers set out for the palace, carrying the stolen treasures with them. The king was surprised and angered to see the villagers and the stolen treasures. Jack stepped forward and bowed deeply, confessing to the king and asking for forgiveness. The king listened to Jack's confession and saw the remorse in his eyes. The king forgave Jack and asked him to promise to change his ways and use his cleverness for good. Jack nodded, tears of relief in his eyes, and promised to change his ways. From that day on, Jack used his cleverness and skills to help the villagers. He became known as a hero in the village, a boy who had defied a kingdom but learned the true meaning of courage and honesty.